Avery Collins still remembered the weight of the fork in her hand when her father's voice cut through the warmth of Christmas dinner. The table had been loud with laughter, clinking glasses, and the hum of holiday music, but his words landed sharply, silencing everything else. "Get out," Robert Collins said, his voice steady and final. "And don't come back." The cranberry sauce she had been reaching for no longer mattered. Avery looked up slowly, unsure if she had heard him correctly. Across the table, Linda Collins sat perfectly composed, a faint smile touching her lips as candlelight reflected off her bracelet. Avery had driven 6 hours through winter roads to be there, carrying hope she hadn't admitted even to herself. She had chosen a modest gift, a cashmere scarf she knew her father liked, believing presence mattered more than price. But the room had already shifted against her. Evan Brooks, Linda's son, leaned back in his chair with smug comfort, as though this moment had been rehearsed. Avery was 28, disciplined, accomplished, and independent. Yet in that dining room, she was being dismissed as if she was still a child who had failed some invisible test. She opened her mouth to speak, but the finality in her father's eyes told her this was not an argument. It was a sentence. "Before I continue, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. Your one click really helps support the channel." "What are you talking about?" Avery asked, her voice barely steady. Robert did not hesitate. He accused her of arrogance, of thinking she was better than the family because she lived in California and talked about technology instead of tradition. He gestured toward the tree, where Evan's expensive cruise package sat proudly displayed. "That's a real gift," Robert said. "Not whatever statement you think you're making." Avery tried to explain that she had built something meaningful, that her company mattered, that she had come because family still mattered to her. But Robert laughed, bitter and loud. He accused her of abandoning them, of choosing ambition over loyalty. Linda remained silent, letting him speak for both of them. When Avery stood, her chair scraping softly against the floor, no one stopped her. The December air outside bit at her skin as she stepped into the driveway with her overnight bag. Through the window, she saw laughter resume immediately. Her empty chair was already being filled. Linda raised her glass as if to celebrate the correction of a mistake. Avery drove away with tears blurring the road, the image of her childhood home shrinking behind her. Whatever family she thought she still had was gone. She did not yet understand how permanent that moment would be. Avery drove through the snowy Pennsylvania night toward her Philadelphia apartment, gripping the steering wheel as memories replayed without mercy. Her mother had died 5 years earlier, and with her went the only person who had ever stood firmly between Avery and her father's rigid expectations. Her mother had encouraged curiosity, ambition, and independence. Robert had tolerated it only because she insisted. After the funeral, everything changed. Linda entered Robert's life less than a year later, offering comfort when grief had made him fragile. Evan followed soon after, bringing entitlement disguised as confidence. Avery tried to remain connected. She called every week, visited when work allowed, sent thoughtful reminders that she was still present. But the house no longer felt like hers. On one visit, she found her mother's rose garden being torn out for a redesign Linda wanted. Robert told her it was time to move forward. Avery realized then that moving forward meant erasing. Sitting alone in her apartment that night, Avery felt something solidify. The pain did not soften. It sharpened. She did not scream or cry. She simply let the truth settle. Her father had chosen a new family, and she no longer belonged in the old one. What Robert never bothered to understand was that Avery had not left to escape her family. She had left to build something real. At 23, she co-founded Vertex Dynamics with her college partner, Nathan Cole. What began as a small logistics optimization platform evolved into an AI-driven system that reshaped supply chain efficiency for global manufacturers. Avery lived modestly, reinvesting profits and focusing on growth rather than recognition. 5 years later, Vertex Dynamics was valued at over $4 billion. Avery owned the majority stake, though few outside tech circles recognized her name. Manufacturing executives rarely followed Silicon Valley news. She preferred it that way. The morning after Christmas, Nathan called her to discuss an acquisition nearing completion. Iron Ridge Industries, a Pennsylvania-based manufacturer, had accepted Vertex's offer. Avery listened absently until the location registered. Iron Ridge Industries was her father's company. Robert had spent 3 decades climbing its ranks. Avery pulled the acquisition file immediately after the call ended. The name Robert Collins appeared in bold under regional leadership. Her hands went numb. She had signed off on the acquisition without realizing what it meant. Fate had moved quietly, without asking her permission. For days, Avery studied the data. Iron Ridge Industries was failing. Outdated systems, bloated management, and reckless spending had pushed it toward collapse. The regional office under Robert's leadership showed the worst performance. Evan's name appeared repeatedly beside questionable expenses, including a failed $2 million software purchase. The vendor was a shell company linked to Evan himself. Avery felt anger rise, but it was not impulsive. It was precise. She informed Nathan that she would personally oversee the transition. He hesitated but agreed. 3 weeks after Christmas, Avery stood in Vertex Dynamics' San Francisco headquarters, reviewing the meeting agenda with her assistant. Iron Ridge's executives expected a routine corporate takeover. They did not know who she was. That evening, Avery spoke with her closest friend, Monica Reed. Monica asked if confronting her father this way would bring peace. Avery did not know the answer. She only knew she would not walk into that building as his daughter. She would walk in as a leader. Whatever followed would be earned by facts, not feelings. The Iron Ridge Industries headquarters sat outside Lancaster, cold and gray beneath the January sky. Avery arrived with Nathan and Elaine Porter, Vertex's chief financial officer. The building felt frozen in time, unchanged since Avery's childhood visits. The receptionist greeted them politely, unaware of a history walking past her desk. In the executive conference room, Robert sat at the head of the table, older and visibly tired. Evan sat beside him, scrolling through his phone with careless confidence. When introductions began, Nathan spoke first, followed by Elaine. Then he gestured toward Avery. "This is Avery Collins," he said. "Founder and CEO of Vertex Dynamics." The silence that followed was absolute. Robert's face drained of color. Evan dropped his phone. Avery met her father's eyes without warmth or anger. Only clarity. She opened the presentation and began speaking in the same measured tone she used in every boardroom. This was business. Avery laid out the data without embellishment. Declining productivity. Financial mismanagement. Failed investments. Each slide reflected decisions Robert had defended for years. When the unauthorized software purchase appeared, Evan attempted to justify it. Elaine interrupted, calmly presenting evidence linking him to the fraudulent vendor. Criminal charges had already been filed. Evan's bravado collapsed instantly. Robert said nothing. His shoulders sagged as the reality settled in. Avery explained the restructuring plan. The regional director role would be eliminated. Evan would be terminated immediately. Security would escort him out. Robert finally spoke, his voice cracking as he asked if this was punishment. Avery corrected him. It was accountability. The numbers made the decision unavoidable. Harold Morrison, a senior board member, confirmed he had raised concerns long before Vertex intervened. The meeting adjourned in stunned silence. Security escorted Evan out as he shouted accusations that echoed uselessly down the hallway. Robert packed his office quietly. Avery found him standing before a framed photo of her mother. He said she would be disappointed. Avery replied calmly that disappointment came from choices, not consequences. Robert admitted his failures, his grief, his weakness. Avery listened but did not soften. She told him the truth he had avoided. Pushing her away had been easier than confronting his pain. When he asked for forgiveness, Avery said nothing. Forgiveness was not something she owed. She left the building without looking back. 3 months later, Iron Ridge Industries was profitable. Employee morale improved. Systems modernized. Harold Morrison publicly praised Vertex's leadership. Robert took a lower-level job elsewhere. Linda filed for divorce. Evan faced trial. Avery stood in her office overlooking the bay, calm and focused. When Monica asked how she felt, Avery answered honestly. She felt resolved. Not triumphant. Not healed. But whole. Avery returned to San Francisco with no celebration waiting for her. The confrontation had not given her the rush she once imagined. Instead, it left a quiet heaviness that followed her into meetings and late nights at the office. Vertex Dynamics was expanding rapidly, and Iron Ridge's turnaround had drawn attention from other manufacturers seeking acquisition. Avery immersed herself in work, not to escape her feelings but to honor the discipline that had carried her this far. Every decision she made was measured, ethical, and forward-looking. She refused to allow personal history to cloud professional judgment. At night, she sometimes thought about the letters her father had sent to Vertex headquarters. 12 of them, unopened, stacked neatly in her assistant's desk. She was not avoiding them out of spite. She simply was not ready to reopen a wound she had just learned to close. Healing, she realized, did not mean resolution on someone else's timeline. Robert Collins struggled in his new reality. The packaging plant job paid a fraction of his former salary, and the authority he once wielded was gone. For the first time in decades, he answered to supervisors younger than his daughter. He replayed Christmas night endlessly, wishing he could pull the words back into his mouth. Linda's absence in the house made the silence unbearable. She had left as soon as his accounts froze and Evan's legal trouble surfaced. Without them, Robert was forced to confront the truth he had avoided. He had sacrificed his relationship with his daughter to preserve a version of family that never truly existed. He wrote to Avery not to ask for help, but to explain himself. Each letter grew shorter than the last. Guilt replaced justification. Regret replaced anger. Still, he received no reply. Avery began therapy again, this time with honesty instead of resistance. Dr. Susan Adler did not push reconciliation. She focused on boundaries, identity, and grief. Avery spoke about her mother, about the silence that followed her death, about the weight of being replaced. Slowly, Avery stopped framing her success as proof and began seeing it as purpose. She was not building to be seen. She was building because she loved the work. When news articles praised Vertex's leadership, Avery felt pride without defensiveness. She no longer wondered if her father would approve. That chapter had closed on its own terms. 6 months after the acquisition, Vertex Dynamics announced a new initiative focused on ethical automation and workforce retraining. Avery stood on stage at the launch event, confident and grounded. The applause felt earned. Monica watched from the audience, knowing how far Avery had come from that Christmas night. Later, over dinner, Monica asked if Avery would ever open the letters. Avery considered the question carefully. Maybe, she said. But not because I owe him closure. Only if it adds peace, not pain. It was the first time she spoke about her father without anger or longing. Only acceptance. Robert watched the announcement online from his small apartment. He recognized Avery immediately, her posture calm, her voice steady. She looked nothing like the daughter he had dismissed. She looked like a leader. For the first time, he understood the full cost of his choice. Not the job. Not the house. But the absence. He realized he would never witness her greatest achievements firsthand. That loss settled quietly, without drama, but it stayed. Avery ended that year standing on her balcony overlooking the city lights, the wind cool against her face. She thought about family, ambition, and the long road it took to define herself without permission. She had learned that success did not repair broken bonds, but it could strengthen personal truth. Her father had told her to leave and never come back. She had done exactly that, on her own terms. And for the first time, she felt fully at peace with where she stood and where she was going. As the new year unfolded, Avery's life settled into a steady rhythm. Vertex Dynamics continued to expand, but she no longer measured her days by growth charts alone. She carved out time for friendships, quiet mornings, and rest she once believed she had to earn. Her leadership style softened without losing strength. Employees noticed the change. They spoke of a CEO who listened more carefully and trusted more deeply. Avery understood now that control had once been her armor. Letting go did not weaken her. It refined her. The past no longer demanded daily attention. It existed as a completed chapter, no longer bleeding into the present. One afternoon, Avery asked her assistant to bring her the letters Robert had sent months earlier. She opened them slowly, one by one, reading without urgency. They were not excuses. They were confessions. Robert wrote about fear, grief, and the mistakes he could not undo. He did not ask to be forgiven. He asked only to be understood. When Avery finished the last letter, she felt no surge of emotion. No anger. No relief. Just clarity. She placed the letters back in their envelope and stored them away. Some things, she realized, could be acknowledged without being reopened. Spring brought change to San Francisco, and Avery welcomed it. She moved into a new apartment closer to the water, choosing space and light over excess. On the walls, she hung photos of her mother, laughing, alive, unafraid. The garden her mother once loved inspired Avery to start a small balcony garden of her own. Each plant felt like an act of remembrance rather than loss. She was no longer trying to protect memories from being erased. She was carrying them forward, intentionally and quietly. Robert never stopped thinking about his daughter, but he stopped writing. He understood silence now. It was the boundary Avery had drawn, not in cruelty, but in self-preservation. He focused on rebuilding a modest life, one that required humility instead of authority. Some nights, he imagined what might have happened if he had listened sooner. Other nights, he accepted that imagination was all he had left. Regret became a companion he learned to live with, not a weapon he could wield. Avery stood before the board at Vertex Dynamics that summer, presenting a long-term vision that extended far beyond quarterly profits. She spoke about sustainability, responsibility, and legacy, not as abstract ideals, but as commitments. The room listened. When the meeting ended, Avery felt a calm certainty settle within her. She had built something lasting, not just a company, but a life defined by intention rather than reaction. The past no longer dictated her direction. She was no longer walking away. She was moving forward. Late that autumn, Avery returned briefly to Pennsylvania for a private industry conference held outside Philadelphia. She did not announce the visit, and no one from her past knew she was in the state. On her final evening, she drove past the street where she had grown up. The house looked smaller than she remembered, the lights dim, the windows unfamiliar. She did not stop. There was no pull, no urgency, only recognition. The place had shaped her once, but it no longer claimed her. She continued driving, the road opening ahead of her, unburdened by the need to look back. Months later, Avery stood in her office as the city settled into night, reviewing plans for the next phase of Vertex Dynamics. Her phone buzzed with routine updates, not memories. Outside the glass, the lights reflected back a version of herself that felt complete and unchallenged. The past had finished saying what it needed to say. She turned back to her work without hesitation, fully present in the life she had chosen and built, and the story closed there, quiet, intact, and final. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story connected with you, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Your one click truly helps more than you know.